And 5, 4, 3. Hey everyone, we're going to start recording the Polite Society podcast presented by the Second Amendment Foundation here in just a second. We had a technical glitch. We were 13 minutes late going live, and I deeply apologize for that. As I pushed the go live button, I lost internet and my computer did a force reboot all at once. So we've got Ben Flowers waiting to be our guest here as soon as we get our show rolling here. I want to, but as far as my staff guys, have we got show notes all updated? We're ready to fly.
We're good.
Ready. We're good.
All right. Let me turn up the. There we go. Now I can see. All right. Massad Ayoob then in 5, 4, 3.
Hey gang, this is Massad Ayoob from the Pro Arms Podcast. I'm here to remind you that our podcast is a member of the Self-Defense Radio Network, and I'm going to suggest you do what we do and check out the other podcasts at selfdefenseradio.net.
Treat every firearm as if it's loaded.
Never point a firearm at anything you're not willing to kill or destroy.
Keep your finger off the trigger until you are on target and ready to fire.
Always be sure of your target and what lies beyond it.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Polite Society podcast presented by the Second Amendment Foundation. We are recording this one on Monday, September the 19th, 2022. I'm Paul Lathrop.
I'm Rob Morse, and on tonight's show we talk with the Solicitor General for Ohio, Ben Flowers.
I'm John Richardson, and we'll talk about the stupidity of those who think tracking credit card purchases is actually going to stop mass murder.
And I'm Amanda Suffolk, and we're going to talk about Heller 6, or more aptly named, Heller Wins Again. So climb aboard.
Strap in.
And hang on.
Episode 634 of the Polite Society podcast starts right now. All right, it's Monday night. It's a little after 6 in the evening Central Time, so it's time for another Polite Society podcast. As we usually do, I'm going to start with Rob and ask what you've been doing since the last time you've been on the air with us, bud.
I was on Bill Frady's Lock and Load radio show. I recorded another episode of Self-Defense Gun Stories, turned in my bio for the Second Amendment Foundation Gun Rights Policy Conference, and I missed an episode of the Daily Bullet because I took my earbuds out and missed an alarm when it went off. So, John, now that you're retired, you are still answering your phone, aren't you?
I am. I actually am. And it's been weird that when the phone rings, I look at it, oh, potential spam, not a client. Client calls have stopped, which is good. My plan to go hunting this coming weekend. It's archery season for deer in North Carolina. And then get ready for our first retirement road trip. That trip's going to be to GRPC, and we're also going to take some time and tour Texas. I've been studying places to go and things to see in the Lone Star State. I even found a place that makes custom cowboy hats starting at $600 a cap.
Wow.
Free ball caps will remain my hat of choice. And Amanda, I imagine you've been doing a bit of traveling.
Just a little. I just got home from an amazing trip from D.C. with the ladies from the D.C. Project. And this was their annual Washington pilgrimage. So there were 50 women. So in the culmination of the event, we do a rally. And this year it was on the Supreme Court steps. And there were 50 women wearing teal. And it was amazing. Though we did have a heckler. And I have to say he had the most overachiever bullhorn I have ever seen in my entire life. We had a cocktail party that included Dick Heller, and so some of my girls were so starstruck. It was absolutely hysterical. And this next week, I'm headed to Lansing, Michigan for the Michigan 2A rally, and then turning around, flipping the car and heading for Dallas. So we're road tripping it to Dallas for Gun Rights Policy Conference. So Paul, you and Susan, what's going on here?
Well, we are hip deep in preparation for AmCon and GRPC. Susan for AmCon, me for GRPC. We've got all kinds of things going on. None of it shooting related, unfortunately. So, been doing shows every day. And by the way, the Bullet shows, the Daily Bullet will happen. We did one just a little bit ago with Charlie Cook. They're going to be going on regularly the rest of this week. There will be a Daily Bullet on Saturday. And then there will be a regular Bullet on Monday, a Polite Society next Monday, and then we shut down. I tear the studio down Tuesday. Everything comes out of here, all the monitors, all the computers, all the tech comes out and gets packed, and then we leave Wednesday and we get to Dallas Thursday and start setting up for the big circus. So, yeah, that's what's been consuming my life for the past week and a half. So,
Paul, can I ask a question?
Yes, of course.
It just dawned on me, and I looked back at some of the messages that came out of Washington. Amanda, were you part of Teal Team 6?
So kind of like that. I think it's actually Teal Team 2, right? For
Teal Team
2A.
2. Okay.
Like Dick
clever.
Heller says, the 2A gang sign. You know.
Okay.
So, but yeah, no, it was. I don't think DC's seen that much teal in a long time.
Well, at least last year, I know it was mostly virtual, right?
Right. Yeah.
So,
nope.
yeah.
This year was boots on the ground, and it was pretty amazing.
Very cool. And representatives and senators were meeting, in my understanding is they were meeting you from both sides of the aisle, but there was a reception and dinner provided by a Second Amendment caucus of legislators, if I'm remembering.
No dinner. There's these weird rules that say that if you provide dinner and they don't pay for it, then you're bribing them. But you can have heavy hors d'oeuvres, so anything they can eat standing up, that's acceptable to have. So they're real big on open bar cocktails and food that you can pick up, eat out of like a Dixie cup or something, set down and pick up the next thing.
A legislator that's a legislator that is in favor of an open bar. That's a shock.
Man, it's there was a line. But I'm not sure how much of the line was the legislators versus our girls. But they, like I said, they had Eric Pratt, they had Dick Heller, some of the other organizations were all invited at the same time. So it was a good move.
Very, very cool. All right. Well, we do need to step aside to break because our guest Ben Flowers is patiently waiting for us, and we're well into the time we've already told him we would be interviewing him. So we're going to step aside to our first break right after I tell you about the Self-Defense Radio Network, where the browser isn't working. There we go. Now you can see it. Yep. Self-Defense Radio Network, all your pro-freedom podcasts in one place. You can see us up there on the top left. Right below us, Eye on the Target Radio happens every Sunday. By the way, wherever you're watching this, you can watch Eye on the Target Radio. Self-Defense Gun Stories by Rob Morris is there. Riding Shotgun with Charlie, Survival and Basic Badassery. I cannot believe we haven't got a strike for that yet, but here we are with them over a year, and we're still plugging right along. Lots of great podcasts all in one place. More coming. Dan Waz's The Loaded Mike Show is going to be on the network one way or another in the very near future. We've got to get that done, but look look for all your Pro Freedom podcasts there, sdrn.us. For right now, we're going to step aside to break. When we come back, we'll talk with our guest, and we'll do that right after we hear from CNJFO. Hang on, everybody. Right back after this.
New Jersey is a civil rights wasteland where an unconstitutional law known as justifiable need keeps ordinary citizens from exercising their right to bear arms. New Jersey spits in the eye of freedom, ignores the Bill of Rights and the Heller decision. New Jersey politics are an anti-civil rights bulldozer and a spreading cancer. The Coalition of New Jersey Firearms Owners, a tax-exempt nonprofit, has a goal to defeat justifiable need, reverse course on all anti-freedom laws, and render aid to other jurisdictions by filing Supreme Court-bound litigation. CNJFO is a beacon of freedom behind the Iron Curtain in New Jersey. Join CNJFO's strong, enthusiastic patriots. Support the Coalition of New Jersey Firearms Owners today. Protect all our rights and return freedom to the Garden State. To donate or learn more, go to cnjfo.com.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the interview segment of the Polite Society podcast presented by the Second Amendment Foundation. Joining us today, Ben Flowers. Ben is the Ohio Solicitor General. Ben, thanks for coming along for the ride tonight, man. Oh, and I have to turn his microphone on. Whoops. I'm sorry. Ben, thanks for coming along for the ride, man.
Happy to be here. How's that work?
There we go. Thanks again. Thank you again. And to get started, I want to... You hold an office in Ohio that I do not believe my home state of South Dakota has. You are Solicitor General for Ohio. In South Dakota, we have an Attorney General, and he's in court and on the news a lot. So could you explain for our viewers and listeners, what is the difference between a Solicitor General and an Attorney General?
Absolutely. The main difference is the Solicitor General works for the Attorney General. So he's the boss, at least in Ohio and in most states. The Attorney General in Ohio is Dave Yost. It's an elected position, and he hired me to be his Solicitor General. So a Solicitor General, generally speaking, is somebody who specializes in appellate law, meaning arguing appeals at the U.S. Supreme Court and elsewhere. So I'm very fortunate to have this job. It's a dream job. I represent the state of Ohio in the U.S. Supreme Court, in the Supreme Court of Ohio, in the Sixth Circuit Court of Appeals, and elsewhere. So it really is a dream job, and I feel very fortunate to have it.
Very cool. Now, Supreme Court, something that I found out about earlier today, something you're not exactly unfamiliar with. You did intern work for Antonin Scalia when he was on the court, correct?
Yeah, I was a law clerk in the 2014 term. So his second to last term on the court, had the honor of serving with him. It's still surreal to say that. But he was obviously an incredible jurist and a wonderful boss. That was just the experience of a lifetime.
All right. At this point, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to turn it over to my team here because, to be honest, to a person, they're better interviewers and smarter than I am. So, Amanda, you're actually familiar with Ben. I'm going to let you go ahead and lead off. What you got?
Well, I have to tell everybody that I asked Ben to come on because I had the opportunity to have lunch with him one day, and he said that he clerked for Antonin Scalia, and I was like, okay, now I'm fangirling. I want to know details. I want to know what he's like. I want to know what it was like to be interviewed by him and to be hired by him and to walk the halls of the Supreme Court with him. And so let's start with Ben. Tell us something that the normal populace would not really know about Scalia, or some kind of a story about him, because he's just such a hero to so many of us on the Second Amendment world.
I have so many stories I could tell. He was a wonderful boss. and I can get into some of that in a minute. Let me tell you how you asked about meeting him, because when I tell this story, you'll be amazed that I even got the job. His interviews for his clerkships were notoriously tough. He was pretty easy to speak with for about 20 minutes, but then he would send the interviewee in with the other clerks. He had 4 of them each term, and you'd sort of get quizzed about the Constitution. So you wanted to have something to say about just about every clause in the Constitution. And so, you put a lot of work in. You really want it to go well. So I went to the Supreme Court for my interview and got there early, was really ready, geared up to have everything go well. I go in, I meet with him, and I thought it went really well. A 20-minute discussion or so, had a little back and forth. He wanted you to challenge him a bit. I did some of that. And he stands up and he said, "Now, before you go, I want to give you something." And he walked over to his desk, and I was thinking that, maybe he'd be giving me an autograph or some sort of memento to take back from the interview. He pulls out a tissue. He says, "You have something on the corner of your mouth, and I want to give it to you before you go and talk to the clerks." So I took it, and I was just mortified because I put so much work into this, and I didn't know if he was testing me or what was going on. Now, as I got to know him, it certainly wasn't a test. He just said what was on his mind. And so anyway, I went and interviewed with the clerks. I thought it went really well, but I think it took about a month and a half between my interview and the offer. I just played that over and over in my head, just thinking, did I really blow that up by, having a granola bar before I went in to meet with him or something like that. So that was a mortifying experience. It was a humbling experience, but I was fortunate to get the job anyway. And then once I got there, he's just the real deal is the best way to put it. I mean, I think many of your listeners are probably pretty familiar with him because he was out in public and speaking a lot. And that's how he was with us. I mean, the clerk's job is to help the justice figure out how to resolve the cases before them. And the thing that was so refreshing to see as a young lawyer was that we'd advise him on these cases, and he really wanted us to engage with the arguments at both sides to push back on what his initial reaction was. And I saw him. I personally witnessed him reach results that he thought didn't make much sense in terms of policy, but the law compelled that answer, and he thought as a judge it was his job to get the law right, even if it led to a result that if he were a legislator, he would vote against. So that was a really rewarding part of the job, was seeing him at work.
Right, Rob or John?
I'm going to toss it to Rob.
Obviously, you can't talk about cases that are pending. Can you just give us a broader look at, perhaps give us an example of past cases? Who is Ohio suing and who is suing Ohio in the federal courts?
Yeah, I'm glad you asked. So Ohio, we have a pretty Second Amendment friendly state. So we have not been sued too terribly much. But one thing that states do, and this practice has really picked up in the last 20, 30 years, is they get involved in amicus efforts. So an amicus curiae is a fancy way of saying friend of the court. And essentially groups who are not, or individuals who are not parties to a case will file a brief that tells the court how they think the case should come out. And states obviously have an interest in a lot of the issues that come before courts, and in particular, the U.S. Supreme Court. So what will often happen is when a case like Bruen recently at the U.S. Supreme Court reaches that court, the states will work together to file a brief explaining how they think a case should be resolved or providing insight regarding their experience with a particular legal regime. And so the state of Ohio has been quite involved in joining or drafting those amicus briefs. And Bruen is one example where the state of Ohio joined an amicus brief supporting the challengers to the New York law there, explaining what the Second Amendment required historically, and then providing the court with some of our experiences dealing with shall issue regimes, and through that can kind of help the court see not only how the case should be resolved on the law, but sort of the practical effects of coming out one way rather than another. So that's a really long way of answering your question. The state of Ohio has been involved in those amicus efforts in various cases at the U.S. Supreme Court, but also at circuit courts of appeals around the country.
I have another question.
Yes,
John,
go.
Amanda, do you want? Okay. I was surprised to learn that interstate compacts between states, I think of them as almost like a nation has treaties. Those compacts can constrain state law, and in some elements of legislation, this political party is in and they make laws this way, this next one is in, they make it the other way. And interstate compacts can at least slow down that teeter-totter. Has Ohio ever entered into any interstate compacts, and particularly for that purpose, to, if you will, make a legal decision more permanent?
That's a great question. I don't know the answer to that. I can say I've never litigated a case that involved a compact. And you're right. It's an interesting beast in the law we don't talk about much. They have to be approved by Congress, which makes them like a treaty, as you said. Frankly, I would imagine Ohio has entered them, but I can't sit here and tell you what they are. I'm not actually sure.
This wasn't a gotcha question. I was just so intrigued to go, there's something above state law? Ooh.
Yeah.
Let's toss it to John.
Well, going back to Rob's question about amicus briefs, who makes the decision about what ones that you're going to join, or that you will then gather a coalition to support one of yours? Does it come from your office? Does it come from the Attorney General, the Governor's office?
It's ultimately the Attorney General's call. So he's the top, law enforcement, top lawyer in the state of Ohio. I work for him. Frequently, in fact, I'd say almost always, our office, the Solicitor General's office, will learn about the briefs first that are circulating, and we'll make a recommendation. But ultimately, it will be the Attorney General's call. I have a really good relationship with him. We talk, if not daily, close to daily, at least during the work week, and we'll often, ask questions like, what is Ohio's interest in this case? What is our citizens' interest in this case? Do we need to join it now? Should we join it later? Is this a case we want the court to hear, or do we fear this could make bad law? So I'll often sort of send a recommendation, and the AG will accept it or reject it, or oftentimes come back with questions to try to figure out what the right course of action is. And then in terms of who leads the effort, oftentimes, as I mentioned, some state will take the lead in drafting the briefs that end up getting circulated. And that's a more informal process than I anticipated when I took the job. A lot of times some party in the case will reach out to a state that they think will do a good job or has some unique interest in the case and say, would you be interested in taking the lead in a state's amicus effort? And if you get that call and you're first to agree, usually it's all yours, and the other states let you take the lead. So I don't know what I expected. Maybe I thought it would be a more formal process, but it is quite informal.
So it's more rock, paper, scissors than one would think.
Yeah, exactly. The states work quite well together. We have, we're aligned on many things. There are many cases going on at any one time. I can give you an example outside the Second Amendment context, but I argued the vaccine mandate case challenging OSHA's vaccine mandate at the U.S. Supreme Court this year. And that was a case in which there were parties from all over the country, private parties, states, and we led the state coalition. And the way that came about was, believe it or not, the way those challenges work to an OSHA rule is people challenge in circuit courts around the country. And then I think it's 10 days after the starting line to file, they have what's effectively a raffle, and they pull a ping pong ball out of a machine to decide which circuit will handle it. Well, it went to the Sixth Circuit, which happens to be where Ohio is, and Ohio was doing a lot of work on the briefing there, and so we sort of just informally took the lead in the state's efforts bringing that to the U.S. Supreme Court, and had it gone to the Seventh Circuit, it might have been Indiana. Had it gone to the Fifth, it might have been Texas or Louisiana or Mississippi. But the states, we work together so much that these things sort of work themselves out without needing a dispute resolution process.
Interesting. Speaking of dispute resolution, we're watching, all of us are watching with bated breath the decisions that came out of this Bruen case. And we see some states go, okay, I'm embracing it. I hear what they say. I see what they say. And other states are like, you're not the boss of me. And they are doing things that are kind of counter to what the Supreme Court decision said. So what recourse is there? And we don't have to talk specific case, but what recourse is there when a state thumbs their nose at a Supreme Court decision?
Generally speaking, the recourse, so for example, if a state were to pass a new law that nominally replaces a law that was struck down, but that is still constitutionally problematic, the recourse is a new lawsuit. You can bring it in state court or in federal court. For a case like that, it would probably be federal court just because it's a faster route to the U.S. Supreme Court if need be. But, this is why Hamilton called the Supreme Court, the judicial branch in general, the least dangerous branch, is that what they do is issue judgments in particular cases. Those judgments set precedents that bind lower courts. But ultimately, they need to trust political actors to adhere to their rulings and to trust lower courts to faithfully apply them. And that can be frustrating, I know, when people feel that a state is acting in a way that's contrary to what the Supreme Court just said they should be doing. And it's a long process, but that's sort of the process our Constitution envisions.
Well, we've never had Cleveland violate a Second Amendment law and thumb their nose at Ohio, have we?
I'm sorry, I missed the question. I'm not trying to dodge. I missed your question.
No. Well, it was a comment that it's not just states that thumb their nose at the law. We've seen various cities in Ohio impose Second Amendment laws that they knew violated the state law, and they go, "Yeah, go ahead, sue us." And I'm thinking,
they did, and we'll just go to Cleveland, and Cleveland lost 4 times, I don't know, to the tune of their citizens have paid all the court costs for like $4 million. So the citizens of Cleveland are not happy campers about it. So the recourse then becomes politically, it's financial suicide.
And there are financial...
Yeah, go.
Yeah, there are financial consequences for states as well. States can't be sued directly without their consent, but state officials be. That's where you see like the Bruen case. And when you sue in federal court under this federal law called 1983, the winning party, the winning plaintiff can obtain attorney's fees, which can be quite costly in some of these constitutional challenges. So that is one added deterrent that states face in thumbing their nose at the Supreme Court is at some point it becomes not only a guaranteed loss, but a guaranteed loss that can become quite costly. So that's sort of a tool in the toolbox of the federal courts.
If I could, I want to get a comment in here. And by the way, if you're catching us on any of the Polite Society podcast feeds, you can comment directly onto the video. I finally got comments connected after working, 20 minutes on it. I finally got comments connected after our technical glitch earlier. But if you're watching on OpsLens or anywhere else that picks us up, go to Twitter, tweet with the hashtag Polite Society if you want to get your comments or your questions in. Robert over on the YouTube side had a comment that I'd like to have you discuss. Obviously, Scalia is a I don't want to say demigod, but he's nearly to that point in the Second Amendment community. Very, very well revered. Oops, how did that not happen? Wow.
Man, it's so hard to get good help these days.
I'm telling you, man, they need to fire the guy that does video production for this. They really, really do.
We've heard that
there
before.
We go.
There you go.
Robert says, speaking of Scalia, one of his good personal friends with Ruth Bader Ginsburg. Was that something you were able to see while you were clerking for him?
Yeah, absolutely. He adored Justice Ginsburg. She adored him. Actually, the term that I was there, I believe she was honored as some sort of like most important or most impressive people in the country by, I think, Time magazine. And Justice Scalia, without telling her, wrote the tribute to her that they published. And he praised her. I think he said she was the Thurgood Marshall of the feminist movement, and that she had not only success as a practicing lawyer, but also then became an incredibly successful and well-known judge. So yeah, I saw it personally. I mean, they disagreed about so much, but I think I sort of alluded to this earlier, that Justice Scalia really embraced argument, working things out by having debates. And he valued having people around him like Justice Ginsburg, whom he respected immensely, very smart, respected her intellect, but he also disagreed with her about a lot of things. I think he found that more fun, to be around people who would challenge him and push back. You know, another of his friends on the court was Justice Kagan, who, again, I think he really admired her intellect. He thought she could push back on him and make his opinions better because he would have to respond to her. And you and your listeners would probably be interested to know, he got her into hunting as well. So Justice Kagan was from Manhattan, and my understanding, if I'm recalling this correctly, is that when she went through the Senate confirmation process, senators can't ask Coyote come out on a certain case, so they use workarounds. They say, "Have you ever gone hunting? Do you know any hunters?" And she said she had to say no to that, and it was somewhat embarrassing. She felt, like she'd been living in a bubble or something. And so she said, well, you know what, I'll tell you this, when I get to the Supreme Court, I'll ask Justice Scalia to take me hunting. And so she did, and they went hunting, and as I understand it, she bagged a deer in Wyoming, I think. I think they started with birds, and then at one point he came in and said, you're ready for big game. And she had a successful hunt, I think in Wyoming, but somewhere outside DC for sure.
Yeah. We do need to head to break. Our first segment is up. Can I have you hang out for one more segment with us, Ben?
Of course. Yeah, I'd love to.
All right. Folks, we are going to step aside to our break. We'll have more with Ben Flowers, Ohio Solicitor General, when we come back right after this.
This portion of the Polite Society podcast is brought to you by The Complete Combatant. The Complete Combatant is designed for a broad base of citizens that range from students that don't own a gun on up to advanced students that train often. The Complete Combatant offers several different courses that build upon each other, from avoidance, using verbal commands, and preparing for contact, lethal versus non-lethal decisions, your 911 call, interacting with the police, to even dealing with the legal system in the aftermath. The Complete Combatant courses are a layered approach for all levels of experience that will walk you through all the many stages of decisions while developing a game plan tailored to your skills and your everyday carry. Please visit www.thecompletecombatant.com and make sure you mention this ad to receive 15% off. Again, that's www.thecompletecombatant.com and mention the ad for 15% off.
All right, and we are back. This is the second interview segment of the Polite Society podcast presented by the Second Amendment Foundation. We're still with Ben Flowers. He is, of course, Ohio's Solicitor General. Ben, when you were talking about Justice Scalia and Justice Ginsburg and Kagan, it really brought back memories of politics back when I was a very young man, back in the Reagan era, where you could be absolutely philosophically at odds with one another, but still be genial, but still be friendly towards each other. I recall Ronald Reagan and Tip O'Neill couldn't have been more opposite in their politics, but they were genuinely friends. And I think that's something we are sadly missing these days.
Yeah, I think that's right. And, life is boring when everyone agrees with you. And I think Justice Scalia was someone who had an incredible passion for life. And part of that was being challenged, being around people who would push him and make him have to defend his ideas. And I think he thought that was fun. But as I mentioned, he also thought it made his ideas better. And I know Justice Ginsburg has publicly said that she liked it when Justice Scalia would dissent from her opinions because it would make her opinions better. So she had the same view. And there was something old-fashioned, I guess, about that even then, where at that point, I think that wasn't particularly common outside the court. But I don't know, maybe it's the fact that they're appointed for life and they'll be serving together for a long time. They make more of an effort to, not to create friendships with people with whom they don't see eye to eye. Maybe it's the fact that lawyers just tend to be more comfortable with people disagreeing with them. But that was certainly the view they took.
Ben, do you think some of it on Justice Scalia's part goes back to the fact that he had been a law professor and had been part of a faculty, and then arguing back and forth with your colleagues?
I think that definitely could be part of it, and Justice Ginsburg was too. Of course, he was a professor at Chicago. She was a professor at Columbia. He was a professor multiple places, but Chicago among them. So yeah, I think that absolutely could be part of it. He really did value the exchange of ideas.
And I do have one question. This kind of off the wall. You mentioned old-fashioned. Sure. I understand the U.S. Solicitor General, when he appears before the U.S. Supreme Court, must wear a morning suit. Do they also make
that's right.
the Ohio Solicitor General wear a morning suit?
No, I haven't had to invest in that. They just show up in a normal suit like everybody else. But it is true, the U.S. Solicitor General wears a morning coat and these sort of fancy striped pants, which I guess is part of the morning suit. So yeah, if once the court reopens to the public, which hopefully will be this year, I encourage everyone to go see an argument. And if you pick one where the U.S. is appearing, which is a pretty good chance if you go on any given day, they'll be arguing. You'll see somebody in coattails.
I have to say, one of the very first times I actually tuned in when they had the live broadcast of the oral arguments when the New York State Rifle and Pistol Association versus Bruen was being argued in front of the Supreme Court. And it was eye-opening to me, how much you can read tea leaves and see which justice is leaning where just by the questions they ask in oral arguments. I guessed correctly from that day what the ruling would be, and I'm not even a lawyer, certainly not a Supreme Court expert.
Yeah, it's always precarious to judge from oral arguments. I tell people the only argument I have been 100% certain that I won at the end of the argument, I actually ended up losing. That was a Ninth Circuit argument I did when I was in private practice. So you never know. But frankly, the U.S. Supreme Court, it's easier to predict than in other courts because the arguments are longer. The justices often will use the advocates as really a medium for making arguments to their fellow justices. And so, yeah, that one you could certainly, see it. A little bit easier to read the tea leaves. They were all if I recall, they were all very active. And some of them had expressed views on these things before, so it made it a little bit easier. But if I'm not mistaken, that's also the argument where Paul Clement, who's an outstanding advocate, in response to a question about NYU's campus, said NYU doesn't really have a campus. And I think some folks in New York City took issue with that, but it was a funny exchange with Justice Thomas.
Well, speaking of Justice Thomas, he has been, at least for those of us who are just kind of off on the side and not necessarily, well, let's just say that recently it's turned me into a Supreme Court junkie, but prior to that, I'd been just kind of living my life. And so all of a sudden now it looks like Clarence Thomas had been fairly quiet for years. And then all of a sudden when he started to speak, he was like really rocking it. So I want you to address that. The second part of my question is, are there many cases like this case that we call Bruen where the case is named after the loser and not the winner?
I'll take them in reverse order. Being named after the loser rather than the winner, that probably does happen. The way it usually works is the they shorten it to whatever the first party in the caption is. So, New York State Pistol and Rifle versus Bruin. I think the reason people are calling it Bruin is it's just a much shorter name. So it's a little bit easier to say than New York State Pistol and Rifle Association. Is that right? I can't even
it's Rifle and Pistol, but yes.
Yeah. So that's probably why that one is it has that name. Yeah, it's been great to see Justice Thomas ask more questions. He previously was notoriously quiet, and he would say that it should be a time for the advocate to say what they'd like to say, and there was already too much talking, and he wasn't going to add to all of that on the justice's end. But I think he hadn't asked a question in almost 10 years, or maybe over 10 years, when Justice Scalia died, and the very next argument, he led off the argument by asking 9 or 10 questions in a row. And I always thought that was a tribute to Justice Scalia, because Justice Scalia would encourage him to ask questions. And he just did it that one argument, and then he didn't say anything again until the pandemic. And they kind of changed the argument format where they went by phone. And yeah, he started asking questions, and it's great for people to get to hear his voice, both his literal voice and his figurative voice, because he's really important thinker in the history of our judiciary, incredibly principled jurist. And I have to say this, one thing that I took away from my time as a clerk that really stuck with me and made a big impact was Justice Thomas, despite being this super important Supreme Court justice, everybody respects him. He could just stick to himself, but he knows the name of everyone in that building, whether they're a clerk or a janitor or an elevator operator or anything. He knows if they have kids. He knows what the kids' names are. He knows if they're having difficulty, medical difficulty, or if the kid's going to school or they're about to get married. Or it's amazing. He is the most down-to-earth human being I think I've ever met. And it really left an impression that someone who's achieved all he's achieved can still be so down to earth. It's a good reminder that to never, for me, to no matter how well things seem to be going, to not ever approach things as though I'm more important than somebody else, or don't need to pay attention to others. It really did. He really did impress that upon me just with his actions.
Well, that's a perfect segue. We have certain legislators who we see on the news. They don't fly with the common man. They don't really speak to the common man. They are in a class unto themselves. And, what's been your experience? What experience do you create in your office, under the Ohio AG's office?
In terms of like life outside the office, I don't know that we do create much of an environment. I think it's just worked out that we have a lot of very down-to-earth people of diverse backgrounds, who grew up in both in Ohio and outside Ohio, in big cities and small towns, who went to colleges in different places. And one thing who have different hobbies today, and so on. And, we were talking about how Justice Scalia really valued being around people who disagreed with them or had different experiences. I found the same thing, is that it's quite helpful as a lawyer to hear from people who may approach an issue differently simply because they were brought up in a different way, or brought up in a different culture, or a different way of, if in the Second Amendment context, maybe someone who had more experience with firearms as a child or as a young adult, and people who had more than they did. So I don't know if it's been intentionally cultivated or not, but there definitely is a diverse group of people who can bring a lot of different experiences, a lot of different outlooks to work, and through that I think make all of our work a lot better.
Well, okay, there's an issue on the personality side, meaning, it's intellectually interesting. Does it affect judicial arguments?
In terms of the arguments we make?
Yeah, does that diversity, do you ever go, Wow. Okay. What about that point of view?
Yeah, as a lawyer rather than a judge, we know who we're representing and we know what the end goal is. That makes our job in a lot of ways easier than the job of a judge. What it's really useful for, having that diversity of viewpoints, is to say, well, I know this argument's persuasive to me, but show it to somebody else who might approach it from a different angle, and they might say, it might be as simple as the word choice here might be misunderstood or might not come across in the way you'd like it to, or just wouldn't be as persuasive. I think there's another way you can put this that will better appeal to someone who views the law in the way that I do. And so when you have people who have those sort of various approaches, you can put together a brief that's going to appeal to a broad swath of judges, not just the ones who are already inclined to see things the way you do. And that is really critical, I think, to being a successful lawyer, is being able to persuade the people who aren't already persuaded. You don't need a great lawyer to persuade the people who are already persuaded. You need a good lawyer to persuade the persuadable. And that those different experiences, different approaches to law, all that, it can be really helpful for that side of the job.
Well, we've already kept you here 25 minutes past when I told you we'd have you out the door. And I'm sure, and you mentioned earlier that you were waiting for dinner time. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to cut you loose. But before we go, I know you're a Second Amendment guy yourself. Any parting thoughts you want to leave with us, man?
No, it's been for those of us who care about the original meaning of the Second Amendment, Justice Scalia certainly did. He was the author of the Heller decision. It's been an exciting time. For years after the McDonald case, not much was happening in the courts in terms of further defining what exactly the Second Amendment right is. I think Bruen obviously announced a framework that lower courts are going to have to apply going forward, and that's going to open up all kinds of interesting questions that those of us who are interested in this stuff are going to be excited to follow and eager to engage with, both in court and sort of in the public debate.
I lied to you because that just brought one thing to mind real quick. And,
sure. No.
We were, as the run up to the decision being released was going out, we were all going, boy, I hope they say any challenges have to be strict scrutiny, not intermediate scrutiny. And then they lay down this text, history, and tradition, and
Right.
and that is so far even beyond strict scrutiny. Do you have any opinions on why that happened and what text, history, and tradition will mean going forward for Second Amendment rights?
Yeah, I think the reason it happened is because of the sort of originalist leaning of the court. When I say originalist, I mean judges who believe that the words of the Constitution were fixed when they were written down, the meaning doesn't evolve. And for people like Justice Thomas and Justice Scalia, strict scrutiny, intermediate scrutiny really arose later in our constitutional history. That wasn't something that early courts would talk about. And Justice Thomas has been quite public about criticizing the whole idea of tiers of scrutiny, that judges have any place in sort of balancing the state's interest versus the individual rights. In his view and in the view of others, if there's a right, then there's a right. There's no balancing to be done. And so you're seeing that not only there, but there was another case this term where the court seemed to adopt a similar approach in the Establishment Clause context under the First Amendment. And I think the reason you're seeing it is just a skepticism of balancing tests that maybe don't have much of a historical pedigree. In terms of what it means, frankly, I think it makes the inquiry quite a bit easier. Now, you ask if it's within the text of the statute or in the text of the amendment, or does it deal with the keeping or the bearing of arms? And if it does, then it's likely unconstitutional unless the court can find some historical analog that suggests that actually, even though it might appear to be within the literal words, it wasn't in the understanding of what the right to keep and bear arms consisted of. So I think it has the dual effect of, in some ways, simplifying the inquiry a bit while also moving the court a bit closer to an originalist understanding of the Constitution.
Awesome. Right. Well, we are going to step aside to break again. Ben, thanks for joining us today. It's been a very enlightening interview.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.
Folks,
Thanks for your time.
We're going to step aside to our break. We've got our news segment coming up. We'll get to that right after we hear from ACLDN.
This portion of the Polite Society podcast is brought to you by the Armed Citizens Legal Defense Network. If you carry a defensive handgun, you need protection from the aftermath of prosecution. Even if you do everything right, you can be the victim of an overzealous prosecutor or even be falsely accused. That is where the ACLDN comes in. They provide immediate assistance when you need it most. If you find yourself under arrest, they immediately pay bail money and the retainer for your attorney. Additional funds are available for trial and civil proceedings. Beyond the money, they have far and away the best team in the industry, providing you invaluable information and training DVDs that are included with your membership and who stand ready to work with your lawyer on your defense. People like Masad Ayub, John Farnham, James Fleming, Tom Givens, Emmanuel Capelson, Dennis Tuller, and led by network president Marty Hayes. Initial membership is only $135 for your first year, and you get 8 incredible training DVDs and other educational material when you join. If you don't have tens of thousands of dollars to defend yourself at your disposal right now, you need to be a member of the ACLDN. Go to armedcitizensnetwork.org and become a member today. And please mention that you heard about them on the Polite Society podcast.
We are back. This is the news segment of the Polite Society podcast presented by the Second Amendment Foundation. As we get going today, I don't often do this, but this morning I came across, and I've been getting more and more involved in Twitter. And Tom Gresham sent out a tweet this morning. He retweeted something. Giffords, I don't even remember what the Giffords tweet was. Oh, yes, here we go. The Giffords group tweeted out, American democracy is being threatened by an epidemic of gun violence and extremist gun culture unrivaled in peer nations. Our new report maps out how states can begin protecting voters, legislators, and more from armed extremism. GunFacts replied, and this reply on Twitter is simply stunning. 85% of gun homicides are inner-city, gang-related, or nexus. Indeed, gang culture dictates extreme violence for petty offenses. I assume this is what you're referring to. And then there should have been the Savage logo right after that. But there's a chart that is with that tweet, and yeah, the vast majority of murders in the United States are inner city or gang related, and there's no debating that. If you were to actually lock up the bad people, keep them locked up, guess what? Your gun crime problem goes away because there's nobody out of prison that wants to do bad things with guns.
The interesting part is when you look at the graph, the majority of the homicides are caused in the young ages from 15. Frankly, it looks like it's 15 to 34 is where the majority is in 3 segments there. But it's I'm old. It's really little print.
What do we do? Yeah, we got that. Well, okay. Notice how narrow this epidemic is. You and I think of an epidemic as something to which anybody might be subject. In fact, half of all our murders, more than half, are going to occur in less than 2% of our counties. That's coded language. We have some 6 cities. That's where all the murder happens. So the fact that, we need to impose blanket restrictions on all you hicks in flyover country because we have 6 cities on the coasts, that sounds like an excuse, not like good reasoning.
If they took 10% of all law enforcement away from everybody in the non-6 cities and they put it all in the 6 cities, they could stop the crime issue completely. Just by a 10% reduction across the board.
I'm going to add to that, though. I'm going to add.
Then they would say that they would be targeting
Yes, right.
specific groups and blah blah blah. But yes,
they
you
would
have
need
put somebody
to
in jail.
also have prosecutors prosecute crime in those counties.
yeah.
What he said.
What he said.
Don't forget the judges.
Yeah, and judges that
They'd be
convict.
like,
Yes.
"Up there, yeah, yes, exactly,"
Maybe
and not
Judge Roy
negotiating
Bean.
away the not negotiating away the gun crimes and all of that. Yes.
Oh, I had an interesting discussion today with Bill Frady along similar lines, and I said, Bill, well, okay, we were talking about should drug crimes be prosecuted the same way, and I said, well, remember, most people who commit a violent crime are intoxicated, whether it's criminals who are high or addicts who are high all the time, or in many cases, addicts who are high, still need money for their next fix, and they lose all inhibitions because they're stoned all the time.
Yeah.
Yep.
So, which is the crime there?
I want to get. We got a comment in from the Facebook side. Donald says, "Whoops, wrong button." But when the city leaders tell the police to stand down, what then? Well, you need new city leaders.
And you go to the county sheriff, because I believe the county sheriff can arrest the city leaders, but that would be
Ooh.
it makes it, yes.
That would make
because
headlines. That's for sure.
It really would. You know? Yeah.
Or we have had okay, interesting issue.
Okay.
A county cop chases a suspect into a city. Technically doesn't have jurisdiction. Every chief of police says, don't stop. I understand he's now in my jurisdiction. We'll argue about it later. Make the arrest.
They don't all say that.
Yeah,
That's
they
the
don't.
problem. My county sheriff has really been pushing the drugs, and so his drug arrests are way up, and he's been doing it in a way to where he has been offending and somewhat encroaching on those border cities and border townships and borders that if they step over the line, they're following him over. And he's like, look, I'm doing it. You know, these are my kids that live in this community and I care. So we'll thumb wrestle later.
Okay, right. On to the news.
Robert says the majority are from a small group of repeat offenders within that demographic mentioned by Amanda. I read a story quite a while ago, and we're talking years ago, where they broke down, and I think if you were to have arrested, I want to say it was less than 100 people in Chicago, that crime would have dropped in that city would have dropped by more than 60%.
Yeah.
Well, I know that they said geographically that if they would change the policing policies in an area as big as a county township, in five geographic areas that are that big, they could affect 40% of all crime.
Yep, I believe it.
All right, yeah, let's go ahead and move on to first story we got, and I believe this broke since the last time Polite Society was on the air, but under pressure from the governors of New York and California and their enormous state pension funds, Visa, MasterCard, and American Express have agreed to keep a list of commercial transactions made through their credit card systems at gun shops. These credit card middlemen make more money the more purchasers spend, but this pivot to social activism, though lawful, is dangerous to freedom and manifests an antipathy to constitutional norms by the corporations whose services many of us enjoy without a second thought. Of course, government involvement is unconstitutional. That was written by Andrew Napolitano over at Newsmax.com. And this, of course, bringing up the topic that American Express, Visa, Discover Card all agreed to create a code for credit cards when you buy something at a gun store now. Apparently, they're going to know it. Amanda, you talked about this yesterday. I'm going to let you take off first.
Yeah.
What's up?
I think that one of the things that some of these writers are missing, they're missing, is that the banks didn't start this. Some of the banks, there was an activist bank that asked for it, but they started it through the International Standards Organization, or ISO. ISO is the same standards organization that does automotive or environmental or aerospace, the ISO 9000 that most of us have heard about. So the standards organization has made the definitions, and so now the banks and the credit card companies can decide if they're going to live within it or not. So part of this is this part of a worldwide thing? Because ISO is not United States based. So is this more UN and blue helmets and our banks are jumping on? That's kind of my series of questions as we get there. And then who wants to go in with me and start buying what are those? Oh, ATM machines to put in each and every gun shop and store, because then it's a cash purchase and a cash withdrawal, and thumb your nose at it. So, okay, let's go back. So, Rob, you were saying.
Right. Definitions are interesting. They're also flexible depending on your point of view. Did I get a gun at a gun shop or at a sporting goods store? Or was it a clothing store? Well, actually, given that they sell tents, was it housing? Given that they sell knives and plates, was it housewares? They do sell hunting equipment. It's food service. And if that
they sell boats, that's why it was
transportation. Right?
Yes.
Excellent.
Mine sells chainsaws.
Marine supply, arborist. There's always Discover Card.
Yes.
Yeah. John.
Yeah, and as the headline of this is "Cash is King," though I think you would then get into the problem like, now where did you get that cash, and was it from drug sales? Were you engaging in laundering money through gun shops, whatever? But my point is that this is a private institution. To think that they are not going to funnel this information to the feds when asked is foolish. As it is now, your AT&T, your Verizon, if the FBI calls up and says, can we see the records for John Q. Doe for this period of time, they usually will just send it to him without a warrant.
Right.
And you have progressive institutions saying, oh, we just want to help law enforcement. No, we want to screw gun owners.
Right. I think you're right. But I think that as you're watching this, as people start to push back, really, even though the banks want to be activists, they are money grubbing slime buckets first and foremost. So if it looks like the money's going someplace else, they're going to be like, wait, what? I need to be money grubbing first.
Yes.
So
profit above all else.
Well,
Yes.
Amanda, it could be that. It could be pure greed. It could also be the fact that the federal government now has the ability to shut down almost any business through the guise of regulation. Nice business you got there. Be a shame if anything happened to it. That's socialism. If government bureaucrats can shut you down because you're not towing the political line, bank, credit card companies, you do sell some food items in that sporting goods store. Yeah, I think we have to shut you down because you're not meeting food codes. This is classic in Chicago.
I Mike over on the YouTube side says 100 senators have written B of A. There only are 100 senators. I doubt Chuck Schumer.
Legislators.
Yeah. Maybe, legislators. I would think it was from the congressional side, but to ask about it. There was some weird bank that I don't remember its name that had come out.
Amalgamated, wasn't it?
No, not even. Was it that? I don't think. I thought it said it like had a W or something in it. I don't remember. I actually don't remember. But a couple weeks ago, they come out saying that they were activists and they were asking for this as the first preliminary. Was it amalgamated?
Yep.
What though? Amalgamated
bank. They were started originally as a bank by a union around the turn of the century, and at one time were majority owned by Service Employees International Union, which is one of the more radical unions.
Imagine that.
Yeah.
So
one thing.
Yeah. Go ahead.
I was going to say, Amanda, me, Rob, we've all worked for very large corporations somewhere in our career, and I just left Megacorp, and what I'm seeing now is that you have the leadership of a lot of these companies that is very much out of touch with the rank and file, who may be much more conservative. It's almost like they're the children or the younger brothers and sisters of the 60s radicals who now, instead of marching in the streets, are now running megacorps, the BlackRocks, the AIGs, even the Exxon Mobils, and opposing whether it's climate change, whether it's
diversity, equity, inclusion,
ESG. Dilbert has run a lot of great cartoon strips on ESG investing this last 2 weeks. Oh yeah, you do lobotomies on kids. Oh, but you have a non-binary person on your board of directors. Oh, you're going to get a high score.
It'll be all fine. So, toward that whole thing, I've been watching. I worked my last job was run by the Teamsters. And so I was watching the interaction of the Teamsters to the rank and file. And the Teamsters would come in and tell them what to do. And a lot of them were going, you're not using my union dollars for these political things. And so somehow somebody's gotten them smarter about how they can, what the forms look like, so how they can protest that their money's not going to support someone or a mission that they don't believe in. The other piece that was really interesting is how many people I saw in the 2020 election wearing Trump gear that was a card-carrying Teamster. And to me, those two kind of said exactly what you're saying about how the upper management is completely out of touch with the rank and file, and how you're just kind of watching these two things kind of come together. And I think we're going to see a change as the companies push back and as the rank and file employees push back, that they're just not going to play. So this, like a lot of things, I see it as that I'm going in for the last hurrah, the alligator death roll, and and it's all kinds of splashing and all of this kind of stuff, where they make one last push to see if they can affect change, and they're going to come away with nothing in their jaws.
Go, Rob.
Take Robert's comment. You're right. That's why I mentioned Discover Card. It's not part of this threesome so far. Amanda, to steal your thunder, the rank and file has, yes, you do, ma'am. The rank and file has a voice now. Through social media, they can affect hundreds and thousands. In fact, there's going to be a conference about alternative mass media, and you'll be there.
Oh, there will be.
There will be. She'll actually be emceeing it.
Right.
Did you say obscening it?
Emceeing it. Emceeing it.
Okay. Just checking there for a minute because it was very blurry in what you
Yeah.
said.
It was garbled, yes.
Yes, okay. No, there's nothing obscene about Amanda, except when she's pre-show and talking about church women.
Ladies,
We don't talk about that.
firearms. We could talk about the Firearms Policy Conference. Or
Yes.
Firearms Policy Coalition.
Let's talk about Gun Rights Policy
FPC.
Conference.
Oh, okay.
We're
Do
talking
that.
about FPC or GRPC? Which one were you going for, Rob?
I was going to go to FPC since they're actually in the news. Next on the list.
Do that.
Oh,
Let me
look
get
at
one
that.
comment in here quick.
Quick.
Because I think it's a great observation. I don't think it's going to happen, but isn't this an opportunity for a deep pocket group to start a Pro 2A credit card company? Bass Pro / Cabela's.
Yes, please.
Yep.
Sign me up.
Cabela's used to own a bank before they got bought out by Bass Pro, which now just uses Capital One.
See, it's
I
so
remember-
handy to have you, the money guy. You know, one would think that maybe you'd even want to name your blog about money.
My
And gun,
have money in the name.
guns make- money and
I
guns.
actually turned in a Bass Pro Shop credit card at one time because it was affiliated with Bank of America, and we know their gun policy.
Yes, we do. Let's go on to Firearms Policy Coalition. Let me get to the right tab here. And I am an employee of the Second Amendment Foundation, and this show is presented by the Second Amendment Foundation. Before I was an employee of the Second Amendment Foundation, the show was sponsored by the Firearms Policy Coalition, and you're going to have to look real hard for me to find anything bad to say about them. Let me get to this though. The Firearms Policy Coalition announced the filing of a motion for summary judgment in its Suarez versus Evanchik lawsuit. This challenges Pennsylvania's prohibition on carry by individuals who've had their civil rights restored following prohibiting convictions. One plaintiff was convicted for use of an altered Pennsylvania Department of Transportation window tint exemption certificate, for which he was later granted relief by a federal trial court. What that was saying was that Pennsylvania was saying that banned him for carrying for life. Firearms policy, long story short, is fighting to get the rights of people who've been convicted and had their rights federally restored, for that to apply in Pennsylvania. And that is good work by the Firearms Policy Coalition. I'm going to give them kudos for that. Is one of my pet peeves is when you have served your time, you've done something wrong, you go to prison for a felony. You've served your time, you come out, you paid your debt to society. They let you vote again. They don't say you can't say this. All of your rights come back. It should be all of them, not all but the Second Amendment. If they're too dangerous to be trusted with a gun, why the heck are we letting them out of prison? Rob, you're up first, man.
Yeah, I'm going to ask a very practical question. Is society safer when we disarm people for life who are late in paying for state permits? I can't see that we're appreciably safer. I can't see that we're safer if we keep them from voting. All right, let's knock this off. John, what do you think?
Well, one of the plaintiffs in this case, in addition to Suarez, is Binderup, who won in the Third Circuit a few years ago. State prohibitions, I don't think should trump federal prohibitions. If you have your rights restored at the federal level, it should carry through to the state. The other thing I was going to say is I'm very happy to see FPC and SAF working together on a lot of lawsuits together. You're starting to see a lot where they are joint organizational plaintiffs rather than one bringing a lawsuit and then the other bringing a lawsuit, and then the National Association for Gun Rights throwing a lawsuit out there so that they get their name out there first, even though they never follow through. But that's another pet peeve of mine. But we're not all friendly about Nager.
Yeah, or
But
Dudley Brown. Yeah.
Yeah. Speaking of that, they just recently did that same thing in Connecticut, and then their person didn't have standing. So, but yeah. So I agree with you guys on this. The thing that I don't agree with, I believe that if you take someone else's life and that you do it with a tool and you do it purposefully, that then there are things that should follow you for life. There should be punishments that have the tail of the dragon. I mean, I think if it's an accidental, like you've killed somebody because it was a car accident, I don't think that that's the same as if you walked into a bank, robbed them, and shot someone point blank. So, or that you stabbed somebody, or that you threw them out a third floor window. That type of a thing, I don't think that you ever get to recover from and successfully join society again with all of the bells and whistles associated with being an active member of society.
I think we need to draw the line at violent felonies. If your crime is a crime of violence, I would think it's reasonable to ban you from owning firearms for life.
I also think they shouldn't own knives, and they shouldn't drive cars, and if you're going to be violent with a tool, then let's start restricting the tools that you have at your disposal. And, they don't get to be truck drivers, or they don't get to drive trains, or they don't get to run boats, or, you start to look at it. If you can do something violent with a tool on a purposeful, violent attack, then I think we restrict your ability to have those things.
And you don't get to vote.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Robert, or on the YouTube side, says, in history, when you completed your sentence, your rights were restored. It would even give you your guns back.
They didn't give you your horse back because they ate it.
Well, and historically, you murdered somebody, you were put to death.
Yeah, you didn't come out of prison.
Okay, so I don't have a problem with that either. But
all right, let's. The next one's a good news story, and I want to talk about.
Is Rob frozen, or is he just quiet?
He's just a very still individual. It comes from all that time underwater. Still water, man. Yeah, exactly.
I thought he was frozen.
Dick Heller, as opposed to Charles Heller, who was on the show with me on Saturday. Dick Heller took DC to court for their magazine ban, their magazine limitation, and you can only have 10 rounds. Well, this past week, DC threw in the towel, and rather than going to court and losing to Heller again, they dropped the restriction for magazine capacity limitations in District of Columbia and sent a notice of emergency and proposed rulemaking to the court, effective immediately on signature, and will be published on September 23rd edition of the DC Register. This notice repeals the ammunition limit challenged here. Basically, they asked for the lawsuit to be dismissed because, Heller's right. We're changing it. Just don't hurt us anymore, Mr. Dick, please.
But also don't make it any bigger.
Yeah.
Don't go any higher. So we're really only talking about this area because they're sitting in the heart of it. knowing that these are the cases that are going to go to the Supreme Court and then have a national influence. And so the other cities and towns and states and municipalities are going, looks like you're going to lose, so roll over and don't let it come to me.
I got to get 3 comments in here real fast because they're all good. Dana, our writer, says Rob's waterlogged. Robert says Heller 6, DC 0.
Bingo.
Krabby Turtle. Heller, yeah.
I met Krabby Turtle this week. In person.
And cool. Dana said, I thought it was a limit on the total number of rounds that could be carried. I thought it was a number of, I thought it was the capacity of your magazine. Your magazine had to be permanently limited to 10 rounds or less. And that's where I think Amanda's idea comes in, and because guess what? That's the same. California's got that. Massachusetts has got that. New York's got that. New Jersey's got that. If DC loses, it loses for the country. So they just gave in, I think.
Well, you're both right. Washington, D.C. said you can only have the ammunition on you, no more than 10 rounds in your firearm, and you can only carry 1 reload, maximum of 20 rounds. Well, if you have a 6-shot revolver, you could only carry another 6, not another 12. Only 1 reload. And I'm sitting here going, that's interesting, and I can imagine the exchange here. We know someone who's been a security officer in federal courts in the District of Columbia. I bet he's carrying more than 12 rounds on the job. And they're saying, due to public safety, you can only carry 12 when you leave. Interesting argument to make in front of the judge who's looking at this guy every day going, you think he's a threat? You crazy people.
Yeah.
Right.
Robert says you could only carry twice the capacity of the firearm you were carrying. And I think they still had that 10-round limitation in there. So no matter what you were carrying, you couldn't carry more than 20 rounds. Otherwise, I have, shall we say, aftermarket magazines for one of my Glocks that carries a lot more than 17 rounds. And
I have a Beretta 92 clone that factory shipped with a 21-round magazine.
There you go.
That would be 42.
Robert also says, I'm sure all the criminals in D.C. were following that law. Oh, yeah, they were.
Right. What is the 22 Magnum that I think it would carry 32 rounds?
Looked like it was from Keltec. Yeah.
PMR 30 or
something like that from Keltec.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Boy, was that illegal in D.C. But officer, they're only 22s.
Yeah, that's...
We don't care.
It's not going to get you anywhere. Last one I want to talk about, because guess what? We're over time. We're at the point where I like to normally be out of here, but
Paul, the real issue is that the District of Columbia is radically in favor of the 1911. They think you should 45 and only 45 forevermore face John Moses Browning and bow 3 times. Why does anybody need more?
But
you could get your 1911 and 38 Super and carry more.
Blasphemy.
I like.
You're absolutely right, John. I get it.
And I miss having him around. I like Gary's option of the 2011. Now that again, Gary's got big hands, so he can wrap his mitts around one of those. But if I'm doing the 1911, I'm gonna find a way to make my hand work with 2011 and that extra wide grip. So, but I do want to make, Amanda, I know you talked about this on your show yesterday. I went off on this lady both Friday and Saturday.
Right.
Representative Karen Bass from California. She's running for mayor. And by the way, she's got the perfect first name. But anyway, on Friday of last week, it was announced that her house had been broken into and two handguns, two properly secured handguns, had been stolen. No cash, no jewelry, no electronics. The only thing taken out of that house was two handguns.
But the part that before you even get on that thing, set the stage of who Karen Bass is. Besides being a state rep that is now the candidate for Los Angeles mayor, she also believed that there should be heavy jail repercussions for lack of safe storage of a firearm. So if your gun was used in a crime, you needed to be punished as if you were the person who was using the gun in the crime.
Yes.
And so that's the reason why we're all like, gotcha, Karen. Because
as a matter of fact, I challenged her before what I'm about to talk to you happened. I challenged her that she needed to, at that moment, sell everything she had, because those guns were going to turn up at crime scenes, and she was going to need to pay victims, and whatever she had wasn't going to be enough. Well, there have been two men, Patricio Munoz and Juan Espinoza. Munoz is 42, Espinoza 24. Were located in a suspect vehicle in the area of Hazeltine Avenue and Sylvan Street in Van Nuys on Tuesday night. LAPD department confirmed both men were arrested and booked for personal residential burglary, although only Espinoza is being held without bond. Munoz is looking at $500,000 for bail. I've looked again today. It does not say whether the handguns have been recovered.
Well, the second part that they don't say is where they got them, how they got them, and how they were stored. And Miss Karen is not saying. So the only way we're going to get the story is to follow Munoz and Espinoza and try to get from them how did they find them? How did they get them? What was the backstory? And yeah, dum-dums, how did you take the guns and not the money?
Yeah. How did you leave the jewelry? How did you leave the TVs and the computers?
There's a backstory to this that we just are way too yokel to understand.
Yeah, something doesn't smell right.
Let's look back at one other thing here. This is LA County. You have George Gascon, who's the district attorney. If I had burgled, let's just say Rob lived in somewhere in LA County. I robbed his house. I stole a gun from him. I'd be out on the street. However, given that they burgled Congresswoman Bass's house and stole guns from her, one guy gets no bail, another gets $500,000. Do you think if it hadn't been Karen Bass, that they would be facing such onerous bail restrictions? This is a guy who was against cash bail in general.
Yeah, it's an interesting, but for thee and me kind of thing, you know. The rules are all different.
For thee, not for me.
Yep.
Yeah.
Did you say two-tier justice system in LA? Shocked.
At least two-tiered.
Can we count to 2, maybe 4, maybe, yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry, but
you got it? You got to share it.
Something smells fishy, Miss Bass. That's great.
Yes, you do.
That's classic.
Did you use?
This one in first. Robert says, wait, should he be released with no bail? Only if there are a lot of reporters around there and we get to find out some details.
Yeah.
And then, you know what? If they think it's so bad for people, let Miss Karen find out what it feels like to have somebody that violated your space just be allowed to walk the streets again. How she feels about the no bail policy now.
Yep.
All right. Yeah, let's go get off to DGUs because we're already, even considering we started 15 minutes late, we're still late. I want to get
I'm not sure my voice is going to hold up to DGUs. It's headed south hard.
Well, don't say much. This is going to be really challenging. Don't say much. We're going to step aside to break. When we come back, we've got our DGUs. We'll be back with those right after this.
New Jersey is a civil rights wasteland where an unconstitutional law known as justifiable need keeps ordinary citizens from exercising their right to bear arms. New Jersey spits in the eye of freedom, ignores the Bill of Rights and the Heller decision. New Jersey politics are an anti-civil rights bulldozer and a spreading cancer. The Coalition of New Jersey Firearms Owners, a tax-exempt nonprofit, has a goal to defeat justifiable need, reverse course on all anti-freedom laws, and render aid to other jurisdictions by filing Supreme Court-bound litigation. CNJFO is a beacon of freedom behind the Iron Curtain in New Jersey. Join CNJFO's strong, enthusiastic patriots. Support the Coalition of New Jersey Firearms Owners today. Protect all our rights and return freedom to the Garden State. To donate or learn more, go to cnjfo.com.
Everyone, welcome back to the DGU segment of the Polite Society podcast presented by the Second Amendment Foundation. These discussions are not legal advice. Some of us are trainers, but this is not formal training, and you need formal training. The defensive gun use segment is intended only as information, not as training. As always, the opinions of the hosts are only their own opinions and not those of any sponsors or other affiliations. Rob, could I talk you into taking this first one out of Chicago?
Sure can. A family was celebrating Grandma's birthday on a Tuesday evening. Some of the family went out to the alley behind the house to check out a cousin's new car. While back there, the family heard what they thought were firecrackers. A 21-year-old man was back there with his 17-year-old cousin when he saw his cousin's face turn weird. He looked to the right and saw two gunmen at the end of the alley. He then saw bullets hurtling toward them. We started hearing whizzing sounds, and then that light post behind us started making all those weird noises. He thought this was serious. It was. Fortunately, the 21-year-old is a concealed carry license holder, and he pulled his gun. Pogo works. I started shooting. I stood my ground. I didn't even move. I just stood my ground and defended my family. The attackers fled, and the family discovered that a 13-year-old cousin was standing there in a pool of blood, lying there in a pool of blood. He'd been shot in the right temple and was immediately rushed to the hospital in critical condition. Quote, when he got shot, he was still breathing. He got shot twice in the head and was still breathing, close quote. The next night, there was some good news to share. Quote, the defender said his brother called us. The 13-year-old opened his eyes, and he has a little movement. So I think he's doing well, and thank God we had faith. We just want him to get better. Close quote. I'll add this. So do we all. John, Amanda?
Well, I was going to just say, like you said in the story, Pogo works.
Mm-hmm.
Think back to like 2009. He would have been arrested for even having a handgun in the city of Chicago. And then thanks to Otis McDonald, and the SAF, we have the McDonald decision. And In a couple more cases, one from NRA and one from SAF, we know Illinois was forced unwillingly on their part to adopt shall issue carry. And now this guy, even though his cousin was grievously injured, he could save the rest of the family.
Yeah.
Right.
I want to jump in real quick, and although this guy did fine, the guys retreated, the bad guys retreated. They were able to get help for his cousin. I'm going to encourage you, if you have a concealed carry permit, get training. Specifically, get training that includes moving. When you fire, move, because bullets go two ways. If it's a gunfight, that means there's two people with guns. You're a lot easier target if you're standing still. So it worked out good for this guy. I just would really recommend, don't just stand and deliver. You make a lot better target than if you're moving as you're shooting.
Seek cover.
Yes.
There you go. There are millions and millions of new gun owners who are learning about the gun culture. The news, I don't know if this was always true. It would be great to see someone who understood the detailed history of our cities. But at least today, you are your own defender until the police arrive, which may be a half hour to an hour later.
This is Chicago. They might not be coming, period.
At all. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Mail it in.
John, you want to take the next one?
Sure. The next one comes from Westchester, Ohio. We are in a different place and time. The internet has changed everything. Courtney Montgomery was lured to an apartment for a romantic encounter with a 25-year-old woman. He was led into the apartment and was immediately greeted with a gun pointed at his face. I don't think he expected that. The 25-year-old and another 22-year-old woman demanded his money, and at the same time there was a 4-year-old girl in the room. Fortunately, Montgomery was also armed, and he shot the 25-year-old woman in self-defense before taking her gun and getting out of Dodge. Calls from the apartment claimed the woman didn't know the man who shot her, but said he went into the apartment with a gun. They claimed they tried to wrestle the gun away, and one woman was shot in the back. Montgomery was arrested just before 9:30 p.m. in charge of aggravated robbery and felonious assault, but according to his attorney, he was the victim of a setup. What was portrayed by the police and in the press was very different from what Montgomery had stated as facts. Upon further investigation by the Westchester police, the prosecutors have now dropped all charges. After Courtney Montgomery was located and arrested, detectives continued their work and uncovered new evidence that showed the incident was not a home invasion, as it was originally reported to 911 and responding officers. Investigators have confirmed Mr. Montgomery was the man involved in the shooting, but other descriptions of his actions were found to be inaccurate. A grand jury must still meet and look over the evidence collected in the case. It's unclear whether either of the women in the apartment will face charges in the future.
Paul's typing in on my comment. We were taught that there is the gunfight, and then there's the race to the phone. You want to win both. And we should call 911, even if we only expose our gun. Maybe if we only expose our gun on accident. Certainly, if you touch your gun, or if you say, dude, I've got a gun, even if it's neither exposed nor touched, you want to be the one who shapes the story as opposed to gets to respond to it when the police are beating at your door. Right, Amanda?
Yeah, I agree. And I think the other part of this is that he was like, I'm not doing any of this, because in all probability, his encounter was one of the paid variety. It was not a Tinder swipe right, swipe left. It was here's $50. What do I get? And so, do you really want to be the first guy to call the police? But in the case when you pull out your gun, you darn well better.
Let's be honest here. There were shots fired, and one woman was struck in the back, and the good guy took one of the bad people's guns. There absolutely, in that case, must be a 911 call made.
Oh yeah.
All right.
I happen to know somebody who stopped for one of these kind of tete-a-tetes, got robbed of their car, which was a BMW, and they decided to let it go because they were so mortified.
Wow.
So people are odd when it comes to their picadillos, if you will.
One comment here. This going back to our first DGU. John says he forced them to stop and move away from his family. Yeah, it was a successful DGU. Absolutely, it was a successful DGU. I would encourage anybody who, if you have to use your gun and you've got the room to move. That's what I'm going to say about that. Mm-hmm. Let's do this. Let's go ahead and step off to our last break. When we come back, we'll talk about what we've all been up to in media, and we'll shut the show down. We'll be right back right after this.
In 1928, Germany required its citizens to register their firearms, making possible Hitler's 1938 Nazi Weapons Act, disarming all Jews. Now ask yourself, what is the real consequence of registration? All in favor of gun control, raise your right hand. Brought to you by Jews for the Preservation of Firearms Ownership, America's aggressive civil rights organization. jpfo.org.
Everybody, welcome back to the final segment of the Polite Society podcast presented by the Firearms Policy Coalition. Looking over at show notes, I usually ask Rob, but I think he deleted that out of there. So, John, what's been going on over at Only Guns and Money, man?
Well, I have an update on a raffle of an FN-15 patrol rifle being held for the East Henderson Youth Football and Cheerleading League. They are located in an adjoining county to me. In response to media reports and pro-gun organizations giving them publicity of the naysayers, shall we say, the league has received overwhelming support with donations coming in from virtually all 50 states. They have more than exceeded their goals, and the raffle isn't even over yet. I gave $20 for tickets. Now in sad news, Ed Head, a well-known trainer and author, passed away on Friday from cancer. He had been an instructor with Gunsight for almost 30 years and was director of operations there from 2005 to 2010. While I never got to take a class with Ed, I met him several times at the SHOT Show and NRA meetings. He's one of these people that is really going to be missed, kind of like Jeff Quinn. That and more at onlygunsandmoney.com.
Ed Head, I want to say this about Ed Head. I have never met the guy. I've never been introduced to the guy. I may have met him, but I've never been introduced. He is respected by a lot of people that I hold a lot of respect for. And he is quoted a lot in training circles. This is not an insignificant loss to the training community. He is going to be missed.
Yeah, we are diminished.
All right. So let's. I want on my end. I want to say that I want to encourage everybody. 5 p.m. Central Time, the only time zone that matters. Even though I'm the only one here that's in it. Come join me.
Rob.
Oh, Rob's. Goodness. I'm sorry, Rob. I'm
chopped liver.
Flashback to your California days.
That makes you pate.
Well, there. Yeah, anyway, 5 p.m. Central Time. Rest of this week and Monday of next week, we're going to be doing the Bullet, and then we shut down for GRPC. Also Saturday at noon Central Time. This one's going to be a train wreck, and I already know going into it, it's going to be a train wreck because this Saturday for the Bullet at noon Central Time, Beth Alcazar, Tony Simon, and Mike Piwowarski are going to be my commentators.
And in the center ring, there is.
Right.
How that's going to go.
Right.
Stand back and smell the chaos.
Do I get to carry a whip? And, anyway.
Good luck with that.
Yeah.
Yep. And a chair.
Anyway, do come join me for those things. Rob, what have you got coming up, or what has just been released for the self-defense gun stories?
Oh, I had Tony. I have 6 co-hosts. I called them one after another. 4 of them played dead on me. Tony Simon had only been on 2 weeks earlier. And I go, Tony, do you have extra spare time for me? Thankfully, he did. Otherwise, Amanda would have had you on twice in a row. It's nothing personal. I just wanted to give you a little bit of break, and besides, I knew you were in Washington.
Yeah, there's a little of that. There's a little possum thing going on with some of your trainers. Yeah.
They lead busy lives. I respect that.
Yeah.
Any of the rest of you?
Well, Amanda, and do you want to talk about Women for Gun Rights? Do you have a plan for what's coming up this Friday night?
No, the wheels have fallen off the bus, and so I'm right now. I'm just trying to jack the bus up and keep it so it looks somewhat normal. So no, I do not. We'll all be surprised.
Okay,
we'll just put it at that.
And I want to plug for Amanda, where you're watching us right now on Sundays at 4 p.m. Central Time, 5 on the East Coast. Do your own calculations for anywhere else. You can watch Eye on the Target Radio. I know because I'm the guy that does the video production. Come join her for that. And there's going to be a regular show for her this Sunday. The Sunday following that, if everything works right, we're going to do both the Bullet and Eye on the Target Radio from the stage at GRPC after GRPC closes, including possibly with a number of the people that have spoken at GRPC.
See, that's what he says. So, like my show, it's either going to be from the stage and it looks like ta-da, or it's going to be cowered in the corner of the hotel room, and you just try really hard not to show like the light from the shower. That's all. So, but it will happen, and it will be live from someplace. We
will make sure there's a live show that happens from Dallas on that Sunday. How that works exactly, a lot of it depends on when we have to give the room up. So
nobody wants to know how the sausage is made. They just want to know that there's sausage coming their way.
Well, with your show, let's put it this way: it's bacon. It's better than sausage. It's bacon. Folks, that does it for us tonight. We're going to go ahead and wrap this one up. I'd like to thank Ben Flowers for joining us today. That was a fascinating discussion. We got to hear about the Supreme Court and about his insight into what happened with Justice Scalia when he clerked with him. So I want to thank him for joining us today. So for Amy, Dana, John, Susan, Amanda, Charlie, and Rob.
Until next time,
stay safe.
Be aware.
And we'll see you down the road.
The views and opinions on the show you just heard are those of the host and the guest and are not necessarily the views of any sponsors or other affiliations. But hey, not everyone is as smart as we are.
Okay, we are clear of the recording. I'm going to go. There's not going to be any post-show tonight. I'm going to go ahead and shut the streams down, mainly because my backside is hurting me from sitting in this chair for so long. And everybody, do please come join us next Monday night. And